I'm so excited to be here because I really do think that we've got a great opportunity now, hopefully seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and coming out of this pandemic to actually make some real changes in terms of how we consider diversity at the workplace, and specifically gender balance within the workplaces, because we know that I'm going to show you, the benefits it brings to all of us. But I really do think that we've got some great opportunities that we can actually embrace now. So welcome to our webinar today. I'm really excited and I'm glad you have come along to our discussion today. And I'm going to give you just a short kind of overview of how I actually see things at the present moment, specifically from my experience with working with companies throughout this pandemic and how things have been changing in the work environment. And I really do think that we are going to have some great opportunities to actually start to embrace the changes that we had to go through and hopefully take the positives from it and actually move forward in the workplaces and the future of work, really taking these positives with us. So a little bit about myself. I mean, I've been working as a consultant and over the past 20 years. My background is in psychology, neuroscience, and business. I did my MBA here in the UK a long time ago. And I joined Hult like 4 years ago now, actually, and I love teaching at Hult. I love the wonderful kind of diverse groups of people. I've seen so many of you coming in from all sorts of different countries, and I used to work in these countries. There were the Philippines I never worked in, or I never been to, and Nigeria I never been to, but most of the countries like Denmark and Hyderabad, India, Dubai I used to work in, China, Africa, South Africa, and the US. I worked on all of these kind of continents in the past 20 years. And for me personally, this topic is really close to my heart because I think a greater understanding of diversity comes through my own life experience. I moved to the UK when I was 23, and since then I continued to first study here and then work in international settings. And I traveled around the world and had the privilege to work with different nationalities. I learned that through diversity, we can really achieve wonderful results as our creativity and perspectives and the ways of working together gives us opportunities that are really fantastic for all of us. And these opportunities also come with challenges as well sometimes. And today I would like to use this session to give us all an opportunity to start to rethink where the future of work is heading, and especially when it comes to diversity and gender equality. I really do think that these events that Hult actually put on gives us the opportunity to really rethink ideas, and where we can pull together different initiatives and thoughts, views on different ideas in business, but in our personal lives and beyond all of that as well, so we can start to better understand each other. So I'm really looking forward to your questions at the end of the seminar. And obviously after this seminar, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You will find me on LinkedIn, and I'm really happy to hear from all of you. So let me start with Maslow's hierarchy. I'm sure you have all seen this, but I think it gives us a great insight into what has been happening in the past year across the globe. As some of you may already know, it's simply this hierarchy really simply organizes our needs from basic needs of food and shelter to self-actualization, which is on the top of the hierarchy. And as you probably remember, when the start of the lockdown started to happen globally, people started to put enormous pressure on themselves to be creative, to learn new things. But when under pressure, we simply can't think about doing what we love. We need to deal with the more basic needs that we have. And in the past year, we felt threat to our safety, our health, our job securities, our ways of living. And women felt the impact of this even more than men have. According to research that is coming out at the moment, and we just reached a year in the UK now from the start of the lockdowns from last year, there's a lot of insight that we are starting to see now in terms of the impact this global pandemic had on women specifically, because of the having to juggle the work and the home life scenario, and they had to really feel that they needed to do really well in all sorts of settings. So as we felt threat to our safety, for example, think about behavioral patterns you have seen in the past year, like panic buying, that demonstrated that people really felt threat to their very basic needs of safety and security. And people started to act in those ways because they really needed to make some choices and some decisions about their very basic needs. And we also think about this, we also lost our freedom to make choices. We were told that we couldn't go out, we were told that we were restricted to work from home. And so this past year for most people has been about survival. So how did this past year impact women, and women specifically in terms of gender equality? Now, when we are thinking about the pressures of COVID-19 that has placed on the job market, people had to sacrifice a lot. And the sacrifices that employees were being asked to make businesses afloat or keep businesses afloat, put women under specifically high risk, and these don't seem to be easing at the moment. We at the moment still struggle to imagine what this post-COVID-19 world of work might look like. But one thing that is clear is that there's a cumulative effects of juggling work and family life through the pandemic. And many of these problems that we are currently seeing essentially are exaggerated when it comes to women specifically. So think about the concentration of women in frontline and caring occupations, especially working in healthcare, or the unpaid care work that they actually take on for themselves, caring for their families and relatives, or the competing demands of work and at home, not to mention pay inequality. COVID-19's impact on the economy meant that many of these inequalities have been made worse. And most certainly, this highlights the connections between them. Women also face high risks of job and income loss. Sadly, when we look at statistics, we now understand that women represent about 39% of the global workforce, but even at the start of the pandemic last year, in 2020, the job losses accounted for over 54% already just for women. So women are also represented in sectors which are most heavily hit by the pandemic, such as the sectors, if you think about hospitality or food service industries, again, further highlighting inequalities. So according to the Global Gender Gap Report that came out last year, it will take another 100 years to achieve gender equality based on the current rate of progress. I mean, when we look at progress, there has been some progress made, and I'm going to show you what it looks like in terms of the global landscape at the moment. But this prediction has been widely used as a shock therapy to push governments and NGOs and associations, investors, and companies into action. So in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic, and this economic crisis that we are facing, these efforts will have to be doubled if we are to avoid losing another 10 years to achieve gender equality, because the progress has generally been a lot slower throughout the pandemic. Based on past experiences as well, when we have an economic slowdown, this doesn't just only affect women and affect women more, but it also triggers gender equality topics to sadly slip down governmental agendas and corporate agendas whilst they're dealing with other matters. So this, in my mind, pushes it even further up and even higher up in terms of the agenda and what we really need to be looking at. In 2020, you might have known that essentially from gender diversity, we started to look at diversity and inclusion within companies more generally. However, we still don't have enough insight. As we come to the end of the first year of restrictions and lockdowns and research continues, we will definitely see more data and the effect of pandemic on businesses and women specifically. Now, if you think about the arguments in favor of diversity, they're very, very powerful. The most obvious is that diversity is simply a fact about the modern world. Women have entered the workforce in huge numbers, and mass immigration has transformed Western societies completely. Even in countries such as Sweden, which used to be once homogeneous countries, foreign-born people make up 14% of the population already. So companies, from my perspective, that ignore this fact may starve themselves of talent, because you cannot afford yourself to be out of touch with your customers. So if you're thinking about the benefits, there was a study published by the Peterson Institute for International Economics that essentially found that more female executives the firms have, the more profitable they seem to be. And there are a lot of other studies are ongoing at the moment, and I think we'll see some more data coming out on this that will support these findings. So gender diversity in the workplace, according to scientific evidence that we have had over decades, shows us that essentially it leads to better organizational governance, better social responsibility, greater occupational well-being within the company, and staff retention, which is usually a really big issue for companies to start with, and also lower rates of workplace bullying and harassment within the companies, which is a brilliant thing to progress with. Lower physical and mental health risks for employees, and also a higher employee participation and engagement. And I think this is a fantastic, just a fantastic list of benefits to think about when you're thinking about driving towards more diversity. So how can we create workplace conditions that essentially help us move towards the more gender equal workplace, you might ask? So let's look at the progress and the trends up to now. Every year, the largest 3,500 companies in the world are invited to participate in the corporate sustainability assessment. And the results of this you can see here. The graphs here present the data collected through the assessment of these companies over the years. There has been considerable attention directed towards the number of women at board level, and we can already see the positive developments as we see the percentage of the women on boards starting to increase across all regions over recent years. It is slow progress. I mean, if you think about 100 years to achieve gender equality, I think it's a long, long time. But there has been definitely a progress being made by companies. And when we look at different industries, the share of women in the total workforce per industry, you can see on this graph, essentially you can see trends here where women in the workforce are still in higher numbers than essentially women on the board per industry. So the best performers here you can see from these graphs are financial, healthcare, and real estate sectors. And some of the industries that are staying behind still, where there's a lot to be done in terms of changing this landscape, is the information technology, industrials, utilities industry, energy, and material sectors. So what this highlights is that the share of women in senior management positions drops significantly across industries. And we can see that the percentage of women in senior management positions has improved over the past year. The improvement has been slow with setbacks along the way, but considering that it takes time to build up the skills and experience and to fight through several layers of bias, this trend is really encouraging. And what helps support women kind of take their career more seriously and consider senior management positions are a couple of factors that actually help certain companies. And I'm going to share them with you now. So one of these things is working from home. So we can see from data that shows a positive correlation between women being represented on the board of companies and the existence of work from home options and flexible working arrangements. So here you can see that only a third of the companies with a low representation of women on boards, defined here as less than 30%, offer work from home options. But nearly half of the companies with more than 30% on the board offer some sort of remote working options. So to give you an example, you know, Microsoft, for example, they recently began offering a new pandemic school closure and childcare leave benefit to their employees that gives parents as many as 12 weeks of paid leave to care for their children at home. So we have seen companies adopting their policies for working parents, which is really, really great. And then the other thing, very similarly, is flexible working. So companies with greater gender board diversity, they appear to be more likely to offer flexible working arrangements to people. You can see here that just 39% of companies with low proportions of women on the board offer flexible working versus 51% of companies with high proportions of women on the board. So we can see that women on the board and in executive positions, guys, tend to be associated with flexible hours offered to employees. So what do we do about all of this as leaders? I think there's still a stigma traditionally around working from home and flexible working. And people who do flexible working seem to be stigmatized. They seem to be seen as less committed to their career or, you know, passed over for promotion and pay increases. So what we need to do as leaders for the future is really reconsider this, and hopefully with the flexible and remote working as a norm throughout the whole of the COVID period, people will start to see flexibility as the norm rather than the exception, and it will hopefully help us overcome much of this stigma. I'd like to give you a framework to think about approaching what we can do about all of this and any change, including the opportunity for better gender equality within the organizational context. It is a framework of the past, present, and future. It is critical, I think, that we understand the context of the past, present, future in the organizational context and where the organization is going, because it's crucial in determining the way in which equality and diversity brings about business benefits. So when I recruit, I think it's really important that people demonstrate that they understand the past, the history, and the legacy of the company, no matter what. The history of the company has shaped the company, including the good decisions and the bad decisions. It shaped the culture, and it is why the company is where it is today. The people who have been working at the company have contributed to all aspects of the company's growth, the directions it took, and hence it's in a shape that we can see today. Now that brings us to the present moment. It is also very important to understand what is happening now and what is going well and what is not. Where are the priorities? What about the future? If we want to change things and make these workplaces more equal and more equal for women and give them more opportunities, how can we grow, change, and evolve as a company? What direction do we want to go into? This will give us an opportunity to start to see the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years. And we really need to think about the context of the future in terms of how do we want to shape the organization? What do we want to do in terms of the employees, their well-being and their talents, and what we can actually really tap into as an organization, and also our relationships with our customers as well. So looking at the past and thinking about the history and how it shaped the company to the present moment and honoring this history no matter what, thinking about the pros and cons, we can start to then think about what we want to change in the future, which will then bring us back into the now, and we can start to rethink our priorities in the context of how we want to shape the future. Now, remember, the past does not equal the future. The past, though, has influenced the present. So we need to respect what has been continuing, to allow us to be here in this moment. It also will give us the opportunity to shape the future. From my perspective, I do believe that no matter what role people take in an organization, they are all contributing to its history. So the organizations you are going to be working for, you are going to be contributing to how that company is going to be writing its history. There's power in your hands. And I really do think when you think about what previous generations did for you and how they changed the organizations to provide you with opportunities in the present moment, you can then pay this forward by behaving similarly and behaving in a way that will help the next generation and help the next generation do things differently as well. So you can really shape the legacy of the organization with how you are actually going to be contributing. And I really do think that there are some useful practices that we have seen coming out of research. So in combination with family-friendly policies, there are other practices companies can use, and they all have a great impact on the company's gender balance. So for example, proactive management of pay equality, including conducting regular gender gap pay assessments and systemically eliminating identified gender pay gaps, are key steps towards gender equality. Also, creating gender diverse recruitment teams and ensuring that the candidate pools are also diverse are really, really critical, as well as setting targets and objectives for gender composition on management levels and also on senior leadership levels, and not just on the board levels as well. I would like to give you 5 ways that you can start to think about how the organizational cultures need to shift so that more women can claim leadership positions in the world of work. I really do believe that it starts with the board. The board needs to take ownership of this. It is only when the leadership prioritizes diversity and inclusion that notable progress is made. We need to eliminate pay gap across all organizations. We need to think about parental leave and flexible working policies as the norm rather than the exception to support parents of all genders. Also, there needs to be zero tolerance policies for workplace sexual harassment and bullying, and equal representation of women in the boardrooms and, as I said, in senior leadership positions as well. I believe, guys, that this is time to reevaluate how we are going to be leading the companies of tomorrow. We all have been challenged during this COVID time, but out of it can come some real great, innovative and fruitful solutions that will make meaningful change for the future if we just embrace them. Diversity and inclusion is an integral part of any responsible business. I don't need to tell you this. Not many of you will remember the global financial crisis, but since then, the women on boards in the FTSE 100 companies has increased from 12% to 32%. So we are making progress, but businesses will need to prioritize all of these agendas post-pandemic as well, because it will be integral to how we actually make progress. Make sure you do your part for the organization you work for, leave a legacy you're proud of. And remember, strength and innovation lie in difference. I wish you all the best. I thank you for your attention. And I really want to just leave you with some further reading. So if you're interested in some of these topics, I'm going to give Stephen a list of further readings that he can share with you, so you can start to have a look into the latest reports that are actually coming out. I've given you an overview on this slide. But for now, thank you for your attention, and I'm really looking forward to your questions.